Welcome back to Interview At, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land any role at any company. Doesn't matter what company you're interviewing with, using the Amazon leadership principles to organize how you prepare for your interview will absolutely get you better prepared and have you showing up better than just about any other candidate, unless they've also watched these videos, but you never know. If this content is useful for you, I would like to encourage you to go ahead and sign up for a mock interview. I still do them for free. You can sign up at interviewatt.com, or go ahead and just click the like button, let the YouTube algorithm know that I'm doing a good job, and people like you would really benefit from seeing content like this. The candidate this week was targeting we'll call it a FANG company, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, those sorts of companies, in a principal product manager role. The specific leadership principle that we focused on was delivers results, and the question I asked was to talk about a mission or a goal that they thought was unachievable, but they were still able to get there anyway. Let's see how the interview goes, and as always, I'll jump in the middle with some commentary and analysis, and then we'll follow up with the assessment at the end. This time I want to talk about achieving goals, right? big goals or missions for a team. And look, there's times where they're just, you have a goal in mind that you want to hit and you just don't, and that's fine. But in this case, I want to talk about something where you as a leader, perhaps even you as a leader plus the team, had a goal that you quite frankly didn't think was achievable, right? There was a lot of doubt, but you managed to get there, right? Let's just talk about what was it and how did you and the team get there?
Okay. Let me take a minute to just think through that quickly. Yeah.
I'll point this out, not every time, but as often as I can. It is 100%, 110% okay for you to take a moment and take some notes, especially in these video interviews that people are having to do now with Zoom and everything else, and you're face-to-face, camera, whatever. But even if you're in the room, it's okay to say, give me a minute. I'd like to organize my thoughts. Take that minute. It's totally worth it if you need just a second to compose yourself.
Okay. So this was the time when I was working at Macmillan, and I was leading a team who was essentially working on driving the supportability effort within Dynamics and Power Platform team. And what essentially it meant was my team owned the front-end experience for support and as well as the agent experience as well. And the key KPIs, at least for the team, was around one, reducing costs for the business and specifically support costs for the business. And second, improving customer satisfaction. These were so from a business perspective, it was cost. From a customer perspective, it was largely around improving the customer satisfaction. So our goal was, and this was our first year in this work stream area when we were working on it. We had an aggressive goal around that by the end of the fiscal year, not only we should sort of build our support experience, because at that point it didn't exist, but also invest in any self-help experience so that we can achieve just through this experience almost a deflection rate. And I'll come to that, what deflection rate means. Deflection rate of almost 20%, which is essentially 20% of the time when customers decide that they want to file a support ticket, how we can leverage any automations or build a solution so that even before they submit a ticket, we can provide them self-help, which would result in essentially less support tickets for the business, ultimately cost benefit for the business. And so this 20% saving would have resulted in a north of almost like $15 million or something just for the entire fiscal year. So this definitely, I'll be honest, like even on day one, when we were just trying to build the support experience from ground up, that none of us actually thought that this would be achievable. But the critical moment for us, like when we sort of took the pivot in order to make it happen, was one, when we had built the initial support experience. I, as a leader, at least invested a lot of time in just sort of learning about how this specific challenge is being solved, of improving self-help experience for customers in rest of Microsoft, and if there was an opportunity for us to essentially leverage the technology that exists that people have already built and partner with them to accelerate our investments to reach that goal. We don't need to sort of build from ground up. If there is something that we can learn from them, we will leverage, we'll customize to our needs and essentially go ahead and deliver it. So as part of that journey, couple of actions that I took along with my team, which is doing assessment on what Office was doing, what Azure was doing, what are the different tech stack that they had that we could leverage from a self-help experience perspective on the backend service essentially. And is there what are the potential pain points in terms of what are the pros and cons of integrating going by Office or Azure, as well as what is the inclination of partnership with Office and Azure, looking at their backlog, because ultimately, if we were to take a dependency on them, we would need their support as well. Ultimately, we were able to close the sort of a partnership with Office team, in which we took a component of their service. And what exactly that was, that based on the user description of the problem, we were able to use a backend service, which was a machine learning service built in partnership between Office and Microsoft Research Group. It would take that as an input and provide the most relevant self-help from either from public documentation or from forums or communities. And so it was extremely intelligent in terms of being able to parse the query and remove, just focus on the most important ones and render the most relevant result. And so we were able to do that partnership, and we were not even aware like what kind of honestly benefit would we be able to achieve our end goal through this. But we partnered with them. In the initial phase itself, we got about 13% deflection rate, but we needed to get to 20%. So the 13% did happen roughly around, I would say, 6 months or 7 months down the line. And but still, that itself was a big victory, to be honest, of which we were not even sort of thinking about it, because that partnership and getting that tech definitely helped us accelerate to get to that point. But in order to close the last mile, the other thing that my team did was that.
Hold on, before he gets to the last mile. This is a case where there's a lot of content packed into this answer, and the candidate would be really well served to maybe break this up a little bit, right? You have to remember that anytime you're sitting in an interview, right, you're there for the full day, and it sucks for you. I get it. Look, every candidate, it's a rough day. It could be 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours of interviews. You're either in the building or doing it by video over a few days, but still, it's tough. Every person that you're interviewing with, though, remember, they've got the opposite problem, which is they're interviewing maybe 10 of you, right? Instead of you doing 10 interviews, you're doing 10 of you. They're going to be tired. They're going to feel overwhelmed. They have their jobs to do. They got their own deadlines. When you talk this much, it's very easy for them to just slowly tune you out, right? There is no how long is the right answer. The right answer is as long as it needs to be. But there are logical breakpoints that you can think about inserting into your answer that will allow more interaction and a back and forth with the interviewer, right? Because at the end of the day, you want it to feel like a conversation, not an interrogation, and certainly not a dissertation, right? Because if you just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, they're just going to lean back and fall asleep. And that's a bad day for you, because, again, the cost to making a bad hire is very high, and the cost to saying no hire is very low. So they'll walk out of the room and be like, I don't know, I listened maybe 20% of what you had to say, no hire. Okay, so in this specific instance, the candidate was very clear with the setup, made it clear what they were going to go do, build a support system. Okay, but the question was about what was a goal that was difficult to achieve. So I heard multiple things. I heard build a system from the ground up. I heard deflection rate, and I heard $50 million of reduced costs. There's a lot kind of going on in there, but it wasn't clear what the candidate wanted me to focus on, right? And as we get further into the answer, it becomes a little bit more clear, because he talks more about the deflection rate, but then he says, well, but honestly, it really wasn't something we were thinking about. Well, was it that they weren't thinking that it would get that good? Was it they weren't thinking about the number? Again, unclear. So clarity is your friend here. And in this specific instance, there's too much happening for me as a candidate, as an interviewer, if I don't know the candidate and I don't know the company they work at, or even the stuff that they've been working on, you're just creating friction in the answer. So setting it up as, we really wanted to, the overarching goal is to build a system, a support system, right? But in order to do that, really the underpinning goal was to make our deflection rate for people coming for support 20%, right? We want to make sure 20% of the time we can get, instead of they open a ticket, they went and self-help, and we had to go build this system. And it really wasn't clear that even if we built this system, which we didn't even know how to build, 20% would be achievable. The other problem with that number is a kind of in terms of being a story that he's using in an answer. Setting a goal before you know how you're going to solve the problem is a little bit tricky, because you're not. I mean, he says all the right things, which is they talked internally at their company to see how other groups try to solve the problem. That's good. Problem is, has someone else solved it in a much better way? Does the 20% even make sense? Does it seem like a reach? So there's a little bit of kind of in the answer where I would just, as an interviewer, be like, is that really a great answer? Does it feel like he's kind of trying to force fit a story here to make it sound like it matches the question? A little bit unclear, but I'm willing to give the candidate the benefit of the doubt. But just for like everyone watching this, just like I just spent the last couple of minutes talking about this, it's a lot of words, and when you speak too much, the person listening, if it's too much, they'll get overloaded, they'll tune you out.
They spun up a quick sort of a solution which was around, it's a bit technical, and let me know if you want me to go into the detail, but we spun up a JSON-based solution wherein teams could come in.
Usually when you ask a question of the interviewer, wait for an answer.
Define certain rules and author solutions, which we were able to complement in addition to our partnership with Office to boost our sort of a self-help experience, which took overall self-help experience to 25%. And the outcome of this entire effort was that we actually overshoot our goals that we were estimating that will get benefit of $15 million saving. Ultimately, it was $18 million of saving in the first year itself at the end of the year, which was a big, big win. And ultimately, it was like not only sort of was individually for everyone who was working on it, it was very impactful. But from a customer perspective, that 25% of self-help success rate was a significant win, which was sort of validated through a lot of feedback from customers that this started asking for similar sort of a self-help experience across different parts of the product as well. It was so helpful in terms of sort of achieving their goal. And we started measuring the NPS of that experience, which ended up like in the north of, started with, I think on the scale of about, initially the support experience was in 1 to 2 or something. It took north of 6 to 7 NPS just for that experience. So yeah, that was the outcome.
Well, so can you help me just understand? I'm pushing all the buttons. So I know what question I asked next. So I'm going to frame it up here, which is the candidate could have done a better job of being clear about what the goal was. There was lots they talked about, lots of data. All of these are good aspects of a good answer. But the core question still remains unanswered as far as I, the interviewer, am concerned, which is name the goal that you thought was unachievable. He talks about a lot of success and a lot of outcomes, but he kind of touches on it when he says, well, 15 million, but no, we got to 18 million. But earlier he talked about a deflection rate. It's still not clear to me what specific goal he was focusing on for this answer. And so in my follow-up, and I tend to be a thoughtful interviewer and try to ask questions that get more at what I'm trying to ask, but also to kind of push the candidate without necessarily being overt about it, which is to follow up and say, okay, but why was that hard? Why do you think that was unachievable? That's kind of a tricky way of getting him to focus on, getting the candidate to focus on what he actually thought the goal was. And if he still can't do it, then we have a different problem. But also trying to get the candidate to be able to elaborate more as to why that was unachievable, right? Because just stating a number is a number, okay, fine. But you're going to have to explain why, right? And so whenever you think about pulling your stories together, you just think about the series of questions you might get asked as you start going through your answer. There's obvious questions you get asked. Why was that hard? What obstacles got in the way? What help did you get from within your organization? These are all things you can ask yourself when you're preparing your stories that will help you better prepare. A little bit, what was it about the goal specifically that made this seem so unachievable?
Yeah, so I think from a goal perspective, why it seemed unachievable, as I said, one was that the day this goal was sort of decided, day one, think of that as when that work stream was formed, and we didn't had even the support experience. Like, so forget about building any sort of a automated self-help experience. We didn't even have the support experience, so that was one. And second,
And that right there is kind of the key issue, right? As I pointed out in an earlier part of my notes here, which was it's kind of hard to declare a goal before you know how you're going to, or even have a sense of how you're going to solve a problem, because you don't really have a sense of the scope of your ability to accomplish anything. Therefore, setting a goal is somewhat premature. And so therefore, like, just product management aside, right? I would argue that's bad product management tactics, and that fine. But for an answer that you're using in an interview, it doesn't present in the best light, because it basically says it was ready, fire, aim, right? You just kind of set a number as a goal, and you didn't really know how you're going to get there, and that's what we're going to do. And then, oh, here's how we're going to do it. It turns out it's really easy to hit the target when you have this really great piece of software that someone else wrote versus something your team has to build from scratch, right? So just something to think about when you're pulling your stories together, to think about how it maps to the question that's asked, but also paint you in the best possible light.
whatever was sort of achieved through cost reduction, whatever we were able to accomplish in that 1 year, Office and Azure were on that journey for almost like 2 to 3 years. And so all of those, what we had learned from other teams and where we were in that stage, it seemed completely unrealistic from the perspective of that we will be able to do it. Neither we had the right resources, neither we had the right tech to even get there. And even from a tech perspective, what we had learned from Azure and Office seemed unrealistic to actually get to that point in the first year itself. Sorry, Brandon, you're on.
Sorry. When you think about important decisions that you made along the way,
Yeah.
and you look back on this process, what was the single biggest important decision that you made as a leader here?
I think the biggest decision that I took was one, that when I was exploring about building ground up versus partnering with other teams within Microsoft, I got a huge pushback from other stakeholders in the beginning, that I think the way to accelerate the investment would be that you guys should think about, you should certainly learn from other parts of Microsoft, but probably build something ground up. Because in the past, they had sort of burned their hands in partnership with one of these teams, and they were not very supportive of it. But I think based on when I tried to learn what they had done and on the journey that they were there, I really pushed back on that. What we need to do here, if we want to achieve our goals and if we really want to make an impact, we have to go ahead and partner with them, because the longer run, when you think about it, when customers are reaching to Microsoft, they are not thinking about whether they're reaching out to Office or Dynamics or Power Platform, they're reaching out to Microsoft. So long term, probably having a consistent support experience across entire Microsoft, if we have to think about it, if we can reach there, that should be the goal. And if that's where we have to reach, the partnership between all these different cloud services is extremely critical, both in terms of front end and the back end experiences. So this is the first step we can take right away. And so everyone was very skeptical about that in the first round.
Okay. So let's. How do I want to do this? Okay, I want to talk about why I asked that last question, then we'll do the assessment for the end. The biggest decision question that I ask as an interviewer is because, in presenting an unachievable goal, there has to be a tension or some obstacle that got in the way. It can be okay to present a case, your story where it's just, wow, it was just a really big goal. We got there, right? But along the way, it's always helpful to have some form of adversity that you had to overcome. And oftentimes that comes in the form of important decisions that you as a leader or as a kind of team member had to make along the way. And so that's kind of what that question was about. It was really to probe a bit deeper as to how this individual thought through the issues that they were facing as they were kind of trying to solve this problem. And they were coming from a very, very, very large organization. And so this is a fairly difficult, complex internal obstacle that he was facing. And probably is worth, and this was feedback I gave the candidate, was probably worth spending a bit more time on story development. for separate story, because navigating those kinds of difficult internal decision trees, and on this one it was the partnering versus not partnering and people getting burned and feelings and all that. There's, especially if you're going to go interview from one large organization to another large organization, or even if you're coming from a startup but have previous large organizational experience and you're interviewing with a large organization, it's the ability to navigate those types of difficulties actually paints you in a very good light. And so that's just a good story that you should have prepared. So now for the assessment that would have been read into the room for this candidate had I been on the interview loop for delivers results. And reading this again, I feel like I was maybe a bit overly harsh, but okay. Delivers results. Candidate failed to demonstrate in this answer block that they had delivered results. The setup of the answer similarly failed to live up to the premise. Without a clearly stated measurable outcome, the candidate is at a severe disadvantage to convince an interviewer that they had in fact delivered results. This was not demonstrated during the answer block. Now, having now rewatched the answer, I guess now for the third time, because I watched it again before we had our follow-up session. I guess, delivering on 18 million in savings versus 15, you could say they delivered results. But for me, and this is what it really comes down to, is role level appropriateness. This person is targeting a principal PM role. You might call it a director in many organizations. At a place like Amazon, this is more like an L7 role. A place like Microsoft, it's like call it an L65 role, L66 role. When you're that senior, you can't not present your case very well with clarity as to what you're trying to achieve and then how did you achieve it. You just can't do it that way. And so that's probably why I was a bit overly harsh in that assessment. I think I'm targeting, seniority for that role. There was a lot of good here. There was a lot of good here, a lot of content. And I think, some of the feedback that was given in our follow-up session was, look, there's ways to kind of refine your structure a little bit more so that you actually answer the question you were asked up front, do your setup a little bit better, then talk about what you did and have that be a standalone element and before moving on to the results. But because he just kind of pushed all the way through, interspersed results with the setup, it just got muddled as to what the actual thing was. And for someone at this level, you're looking for a bit better executive communication skills. So that wraps it up for us this week. Remember every week I do these sessions where I bring in one segment of a mock interview that we conduct still for free at interviewat.com, where you can sign up and get your free mock interview, where I post one of these videos and we do some deep dive analysis to see how the candidate did and, hopefully teach you how you can prepare a little bit better from, real interviews that are happening every day. Because it's better to do a mock interview when there's nothing on the line than to actually have this kind of feedback surface on you when, a job interview matters.